Happy National Apprenticeship Week. My name is Gavin from FE News. And I'm joined with Phil Smith from Skills England, chair of Skills England. How are you, Phil?
Yeah, I'm great, Gavin. Great to see you. And thank you for the opportunity to have another chat. It's well, I'm looking forward to it, especially on National Apprenticeship Week, which is an exciting, week, which is, great. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for taking time out. It's a busy week for everyone, National Apprenticeship Week, isn't it? It's one of those, which is great to have a celebration, but everyone is everywhere, if you know what I mean, and doing all the stuff which we should do as the sector, if you know what I mean, basically.
Yeah, definitely.
So for you, why is National Apprenticeship Week so important, Phil?
Well, you've kind of encapsulated a little bit in that introduction, Gavin. I mean, little as it was, it's excitement, because we all in this sector, there's a lot of stuff going on. Every day there's changes, there's ups and downs and so on. But the thing that always gives you most excitement is when you actually hear or see or talk to or listen to the apprentices themselves, and you think, oh my God, this is what it's all about. This is actually about people getting opportunities that they haven't had before, about being really enthused about things. And it goes everywhere from the regular person who's just gone through the route and done an apprenticeship and got a great job and is doing good stuff, to the transformational ones, where somebody was, working in a job that they didn't really want to be in, and they suddenly found an apprenticeship and it's transformed, and now they've got a career that they're really excited about. That makes it all worthwhile, to be quite honest. And obviously in young people in particular, when you see them with the hope for the future and whatnot, which, we really need at the moment. It's, I think there's a lot going on in the world that it's kind of nice to have hope and young people really feeling hopeful about the future. So it's great. And the week is a celebration of that, isn't it? I mean, the week is, how do you go about, seeing that everywhere in different parts of the country? I mean, you'll be everywhere, I'm sure, looking at all the different things happening. And although it's called National Apprenticeship Week, the point is the nation's made up of lots of different parts, and all the different bits, in the localities will be really important. So yeah, that's exciting. It's good that we celebrate it.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the 19th National Apprenticeship Week. This started in 2007. It's like time has disappeared. I had dark hair and was skinny when that was.
So you were a boy at that point, Gavin, weren't you?
But it's important, and I think you're absolutely right. It is about those individual stories of the apprentice, isn't it? And their journey, because sometimes, we say it's learner focused as a system, but sometimes we can get, last year was a lot of announcements. People can get stuck into that policy sort of space, and it's this then remembering the apprentice, really, but also the impact to an employer. I mean, you have got a previous, commercial background and stuff like that, and that importance of apprentices making a difference in organisations, small and large, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a big impact when we started doing apprenticeships at Cisco, when I ran Cisco. It was amazing. You not only were you bringing relatively young people into the organisation in many cases, not always. Some of the apprentices had done stuff before, but when you're bringing young people in, it brings an energy and an excitement. And, the results of it were amazing. We got much better gender balance. We got people who are incredibly loyal and subsequently carried on being incredibly loyal in the organization. And you brought a real energy. You'd be putting apprentices into different departments and whatnot, and finding them really, kind of revitalizing some of the old lags who had been there for a while and felt it was just all getting hard. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And I think that's, one of the exciting things about apprenticeships. And of course, I mean, we'll probably talk about it more, but the fact that now, when it was that sort of whole perception of, you do a degree or you maybe do an apprenticeship if you can't do a degree, that's definitely changed. And, although there's clearly some legacy of it around in lots of places, there's a real genuine sense now that, that's a valid path to go through. It's really getting you close to work. It's getting people much more tied into organizations and companies and business generally, understanding what that's all about. Amazing. I think we've come a long way, and I think National Apprenticeship Week is a great way of celebrating that. And I'm sure I hope it will be figured all across the media and across the social media as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, isn't it great that it's obviously worked over those 19 years that, apprenticeships are mentioned much, much more, and stuff like that in mainstream media as people want at the bus stop. Do you know what I mean? Everyone is got an opinion about this sort of
Yeah.
thing. What would you were, Cisco side, also now, Skills England. What would you say to any employers who haven't engaged on apprenticeships before? What would you sort of want to get across as a message to them, really?
Well, I think, if they've not engaged, there's lots of reasons why people don't engage with things. Obviously, that from lack of time, maybe if you're a small business and focus, or maybe, you think you've got it all sussed as a large employer and so on, and, you're quite happy with it. But, that's not the message I hear. When I'm out talking to people, Gavin, and like you, I talk to a lot of people, I get a real sense that people have not got the skills they need, that they feel that they're not getting maybe the quality that they need in all circumstances, or that they need to, progress through, and people need to relearn new skills and so on. And so I think what you've got in the apprenticeship model is, if you're taking it for young people, you've got the opportunity for young people to get under the skin of business. Because, if you carry on an academic life, that's fine, but, you're not necessarily having to touch business. And when you find people, young people in particular, coming into business and suddenly realizing that actually it's really interesting. Business isn't this big other thing that's outside. It's part of life, and they get excited about it. And it doesn't matter what company or organization they're working for, they start to be really proud of that and want to make success of it and so on. So I think apprenticeships are great because they bring you in that slightly kind of stepwise environment where you're still doing some training and so on as well, but you're also really getting exposure to business. So, that's the kind of overall perspective. But if you're an employer who's never done it before, then, picking up some of the key reasons, if you're a small business, there are definitely ways, and certainly part of what Skills England's trying to do is to really help to simplify this, to make it easier. And there are lots of schemes around, where bigger employers are helping smaller employers, and where, there's regional places where they're kind of creating sort of brokerage models and so on. So people are trying, and we're trying to sort of make it easier for people to engage with the system. So that's one thing. But then there's, people who are kind of like, well, do I really want apprentices, and is it going to be beneficial? Everybody I talk to, from the biggest, the BAEs and the Rolls Royces and the Ciscos and so on in the world, right down to smaller companies all around the country, when they've got apprentices on board, they're absolutely blown. In fact, I'm not sure I've ever heard a company who said, yeah, we took on apprentices and it really didn't work. I mean, you might have occasional of a small plumber who took one on and that particular apprentice didn't work or whatever. But I think generally people have a really positive perspective on it. And so I think one of the things we've really got to show, and National Apprenticeship Week's another great example of it, is, people like me doing things like I do. So if I am a small electrical supplier, and there's an example of someone who's got a bunch of apprentices who are doing amazing stuff and are bringing in a whole set of extra skills, that's interesting. And I think that's where, showcasing like this and really saying, don't underestimate. It's not just about bringing a person on. It's about bringing a whole kind of culture into the organization. And we know that organizations' culture is everything. And so I think apprentices really bring that. And, I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but it is a really, really powerful thing once you get over the Rubicon, if you will, across the Rubicon.
Yeah. And there's been a lot of change, around trying to make it easier for people and trying to navigate that. And SMEs, like you've mentioned, there's a lot of change now for SMEs and for young people as well, as a focus to try to marry the two together, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, whether it be, funding, changes which allow people to do, full funding, or whether it be about making it easier for small businesses. And obviously the whole kind of regional place-based push at the moment is powerful, because, a lot of small businesses, they want to look to someone locally to help them. And so if it's the chamber or the combined authority or whatever that's got schemes, then that's good as well. That really helps. I was chatting to Wigan and Lee last week, Anna up there, and she was talking about how they've got schemes where they're sort of bringing people on and really helping the small business in the college there, really helping the small businesses understand how to apply for apprentices and get them on board. it's great. There's a lot of that stuff around locally. It's difficult to sort of mandate that nationally, but if we can get lots of that going on locally, that could be a really powerful way of just getting people over the barrier, And once you're over the barrier, people are advocates, So.
Then it unlocks, and stuff like that for people, doesn't it? I mean, the other thing I just wanted to touch on really is it's about raising awareness. So not just for employers, but a lot of the time as well, young people can say that they found out about apprenticeships via different routes, and it's also maybe one of those things, is looking at schools as well a little bit more about how do we help them with those progression pathway routes.
And parents and everything as well. So I completely agree with you. I mean, we've got to get, change is a hard thing to do, Gavin. You know what it's like. Any change is hard, and trying to persuade people that it's all changed with one marketing campaign or one message or one number on the news, it's not going to happen. What you need is a continuous sort of flow of things. And I think, getting young people who maybe see, that someone who left their school 2 years ago comes back in again and talks to the school and goes, I did this thing and it was really good. Somebody older like me going in and telling somebody at school is a bit less recognizable, it's fair to say. But if a young person who's just left goes back in, or if an employer who's local who said, we're taking our apprentices and we took some from your school and some from that school over there, that's really powerful, So it makes making it real for people. We know that's what really resonates. And if you're a young person, frankly, it's pretty confusing. I don't know what I want to do. I hear all this stuff going on. I'll probably talk about AI as we usually do. I hear all this stuff going on, and what should I do and what should I study? And I think, we've got to give them a bit of comfort. And I don't just mean young people in school, but, young people in looking for jobs, or even young people who are kind of wanting to maybe change their career in some way, early on, and maybe done something and it doesn't feel quite right. And, a lot of that is really about getting consistent on messaging and letting people understand. And lots of people are doing that. Lots of people are doing it. And again, just coming back to National Apprenticeship Week, this is a great example of it. If somebody goes, oh, that's interesting, what are they doing over there? And there's something going on, and they think, oh, it's interesting. And hopefully schools will, hear a bit about it as well. That would be great, And
that mainstream media approach with like hearing more about apprenticeships, it just brings it back to the top of the list on all things that's happening for them as well, doesn't it?
Exactly. And people like Steph Gavin, who we know is out there, champion apprenticeships. She's great, Steph, and she's was an apprentice herself and so on. And so when you start to get people you sort of recognize talking about it. I mean, I remember when I think I told you before, but when I went to Germany many years ago, you go over there and obviously it's a different system and whatever, but the kind of vocational learning thing is massive over there. And I went to see Siemens, I think it was, and they had 8,000 apprentices, 2,000 a year they take on. And then, the board, the bulk of the board were people who'd been apprentices. And once you get to that sort of level, it's all not game over, but you game done, so to speak, because it's become part of it. We're still on that journey, I think, but it's definitely improved.
Definitely. Yeah, but it's changing. That 19 years has changed it, isn't it? It's so from a year ago, things obviously changed around, skills mechanisms and things like this. So how has skills, would you say, moving into DWP, so Department for Work and Pensions, how can that impact apprenticeships and help more young people into work? Because that's a change compared to last year. But I can see loads of ways that can work, if you know what I mean. But it'd be good to be able to sort of get a bit of insight from you as chair for Skills England on it, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it that, I don't think we ever saw it as a restriction being part of DFE or being an arm's length body from DFE. We were trying to do what we're trying to do. But when you've got the kind of political narrative, is very strongly aligned to a particular area, then of course it supports the whole kind of model. And DWP is the Department for Work and Pensions. We obviously see DWP as a department for, getting people into work. But actually, it's clear to say also the Department for Work and Pensions is a department for work. So, what's the future of work going to look like? And we'll talk more about that in AI. So I think that's one area with it before we go into about young people. I think that's really important. We're actually looking now not at the department for educating and always getting people skilled up, but you're looking at the department that cares about getting people into jobs, making sure those are good quality jobs, improving the jobs, getting the labor force more skilled and capable and productive and so on. So that's important. But particularly it's important in overall, but at the moment there's a particular focus on young people, and people use the phrase NEETs and whatnot. They're not in education or training. That's not good. I mean, as a nation, as a productive, or as a modern, well, not productive, but less productive than it should be, but a modern economy, in the way we are, I mean, we shouldn't have 1 million young people who are not in education or training. And, apparently 300,000 of them are not even on benefits. So it's not like this narrative you hear about, there's a load of people sitting on benefits who are just, don't want to work. It's a complex thing. I mean, when young people, there's people with caring responsibility, there's people who have been through COVID. I mean, gosh, how many people who were in school or, at college or whatever during that time when they weren't able to see their friends and they were trying, I mean, it must be incredibly hard. And so I think the DWP move and the Secretary of State, is very focused on how we do, get youth into work. And that's super important. It's a balance. We need to make sure we've got a vibrant, industry and economy that's able to receive people into jobs. But we ultimately really need to try and get these young people into work. And I think that's a useful balance. And, there's lots of things that we can do around that. There's the sort of overall messaging and obviously the engagement of industry and so on. But, there's also the sort of general sense of us trying to unpick, where some of the real issues are and whether we can intervene in those areas to try and solve those problems. Because, again, as I said to you before, Skills England's got 2 or 3 things that it's really focusing on. One of them is kind of, doing things based on data. And if the data is telling you that a particular area is a challenge, then we need to address that rather than have a kind of anecdotal, it's all about needs, so therefore, we need a bunch of jobs and it'll be fine. Well, that's not the case. There's lots of complexity in here. How some of the stuff we've talked about, how do people hear about them? How do they, how do they know where to go and all that sort of stuff? We've got to fix all of that, but we do also need employers and others to be engaged in it too. So yeah, it's an interesting move. I think the other thing, it probably brings a bit of innovation, Gavin, as well. If you're in an environment where it's not just about, sort of traditional educational qualifications and so on. Again, I don't think we felt restricted, but you've just got a little bit of a sense, actually, maybe the solution isn't always, the way that we've thought about it in the past. Maybe there's some new things. And, again, we'll probably talk about it in there, but the AI boost thing that was done a couple of weeks ago, which was the government said they were going to train 7.5 million people on AI, and they now upped that to 10 million. Secretary of State for DSET, Liz Kendall, she was using, I think, the very smart message that, this is actually about helping people understand what all this is about, because most people hearing about AI, and again, I know we'll talk about that, but what does it really mean? What sort of job should it be looking for? Well, where do I go and so on? So I think from young people, this is really about trying to wrap our arms around them a little bit and try and see if we can find a way to get them into the system.
Yeah, I mean, from outside in, for me, I think it's a really, really good move of because before there was the mantra education, which is fine, but what's the end point? How is that getting people work ready? Do you know what I mean? How is that getting people learning to learn to be able to be skilled and upskilled? And the world of work's going to change massively in the next 10 years. I would say probably 7, actually. The AI rocket's gone, it's at the countdown, it's on the launch pad, but it's still doing that rumble. It ain't gone yet, is it? How that's going to impact things. But I love it that Skills England is data led and looking at the numbers, and this means we can be more responsive, doesn't it? It means we can be more, not just back foot all the time, but helping people get to those, particularly as this speeds up with the world of work changing. So for me, I think it's great. There's been a few changes around shorter duration apprenticeships, but also a few other things which some of our audience would have heard about, but say things like foundation apprenticeships and stuff like that, and how that's sort of going and what that means and how that fits, but also the shorter duration and looking at quality and the sort of the thought process around that, because I think you touched on it, but it'd just be good to maybe unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's important, Gavin, because, we know, as we said already in other contexts, change takes time. It's not easy to just expect that, you announce something and suddenly everybody's doing it. I mean, it just doesn't work like that, unless it's some sort of completely, authoritarian, thou shalt not do whatever, or you shall do that. And that's not the way we want to work as a country, obviously, and it's not the way things work. So, when we look at the sort of higher layer of what we're really trying to achieve here, we're saying, can we help people get into work? Is there a vehicle to start to give people some of the basic skills that they need to go into some sectors? And obviously foundation apprenticeships is a sort of effort to try and do that, to give people, lower level starting points to get into further apprentices. And, and it's been taking time to get going, it's fair to say, there's definitely, but I mean, that's not entirely surprising because it's something new. It's not fitting into vehicles that are right. But part of the role of Skills England is for us to be listening to how that works, and to the point we were making before about being data-led. I mean, okay, if the numbers are not brilliant on something, then okay, what are the issues? Not let's just go, oh, the numbers are not brilliant, so therefore let's shout at everybody. It's like, okay, well, why is that? Is it not being advertised enough? Is it not fitting into things? Do we need to recheck it with employers again? That's our job to do that. And I think that sort of whole employer engagement stuff that you and I have talked about before is super important for us. This is not a, you create something and do it. I mean, I was using, I think when I talked to you before, I was using this sort of metaphor of like I obviously come from technology and of creating a product. You create a product, you go, this is the best product ever created. Stick it on the shelf and just go, there you go, and expect people to find it. It doesn't work like that. The world needs to be, in the nicest form, sold to, which means you need to tell people about things and how they fit. And people have to go, oh yeah, I heard about that, but I'm not sure what it is. And then, oh, I heard somebody's using it, so maybe I'll. So, we need to think about that. But I think if we move on to the sort of, shorter courses and the way that apprenticeships are being structured and apprenticeship reform and, all that stuff, really what it's saying is, the apprenticeship system's amazing, because we're going to hear amazing things about it in National Apprenticeship Week. But, the world that you and I just touched on, I'm sure we'll talk more about, is moving incredibly fast at the moment. And some things you create are maybe a bit clunky and slow and are not really built for this new world. So we need to do things like, shorten them. But that's part of employers going, oh, I don't want it to be as long as that. And the learners even saying that. So we're saying, okay, so let's shorten some apprentices down. Can we make sure we do that in a balanced way? Yeah, absolutely. Is it all about, oh, it's all going to be terrible or it's all going to be amazing? No, there's probably going to be a bit of iteration on that. But it's also about, can we keep the quality and the prestige behind it? If an apprentice who's just done an apprenticeship now comes in and somebody next year says, oh yeah, I only spent 3 weeks doing my apprenticeship and I've got the same badge as you. It's like, really? How does that work? So, we need to keep that quality and recognition by employers that they're getting certain things done. But, I think we'd all recognize the world is very different, even than when the National Apprenticeship Week started, to where it is now. Things are more dynamic. People tend to learn online. They've got, they're naturally being much more online oriented than they were before. They get information. How much, I've said this before, that when your washing machine breaks down, you don't say, I need to go and do an apprenticeship. You go on YouTube and you have a look and see how to fix it. It's not quite that far, but that sort of general model of I want skills that are contextually sensitive to me. Yeah. So we need to build the kind of quality that allows people to be, confident that we've got the right skills, but we need to give mechanisms where people can update skills, or they can get contextually relevant skills, or they can do whatever. And that's, everything from foundation apprentices to shorter course things, to changes to the way that apprenticeships are measured and assessed and all that. It's not because we're trying to screw it all up. It's because we're actually trying to make it work in the modern world. And that's a balance. And we need to keep talking to people about it and finding out what the feedback is. And because, we can't just assume it's just like a product. If somebody builds a product, the first iteration never works the same way as your fifth iteration. I'm not saying we need 5 iterations, but you iterate it because it changes and you need new things, So that's really what
It's being like an agile sort of mindset, isn't it? And framework coming from like a sort of like tech sort of background. Could we you touched on it, but like the apprenticeship units, because that's to me is like I remember I think it was at ELP conference we first about bolt on and stuff like that rather than Bolton and stuff like it's like how does that sort of fit into the mix with shorter duration and
no, that's a really good point as well.
And stuff like that, you know. Go on.
No, I was only just saying, you know, it definitely fits into it. So shorter courses, you know, again, think of it in your own mind. I mean, I seem to remember, I think it was the first week I started in a role skills again. I was with Jackie Smith. We're talking to one of the guys from the colleges, and there was a kind of example where somebody said something like, oh, you know, we've got this sort of people are looking for people who can handle dual renewable and traditional heating systems, you know, controllers for, you know, air source and traditional combined. And I think the kind of path it was going down is we're going to create an apprenticeship for it. It's like, we don't need an apprenticeship for that. These guys are probably already doing an apprenticeship on, you know, heat pumps or on whatever. You need something that's a short course that gives them an update, because they don't want to be doing it forever. In fact, those hybrid systems are not probably going to be around forever. They just need to be able to do it now. So in that course, maybe you want a short course that updates you on that. AI, the same thing. I mean, God, if you wrote a course on AI today, it'd be out of date next week, you know? So it's hard. So we need some short courses, you know, apprenticeship units as they're called now, to say, can we look at areas that have got dynamism in them, and you know, can we get that into the system? And of course, the reason they're kind of in the apprenticeship structure is because the levy and the evolution of the levy, you know, should be able to fund these units. So, you know, because I think employers said, you know, we need something different, and so the short courses were a start at doing that. You know, I don't think we're finished on that yet. There's more to go as we evolve. You know, the way that the funding works, and you can support it. But the basic principle is, are there things which are not really fully fledged apprenticeships or fully fledged courses or qualifications, but they're shorter, contextual, relevant, maybe more dynamic, maybe updated more often, whatever, you know, that's sort of the thinking, I think.
Yeah, because like you said, not everything should be an apprenticeship. You know, if it's like shorter, but it's still got that on demand, and as you said, things can change rapidly. They're going to in this. It's getting us ready for this rapid change that we've got coming. Basically, isn't it? Is that things?
And I think that's true of the way we create the things as well. You know, there'll be things over the next period you'll hear about. You know, the ability to sort of get an apprenticeship much, you know, more condensed. You know, so that we don't, if we're going to update something, we don't have to take a long time to do it, because we're, you know, Skills England's job is to try and optimize that whole process. So hopefully we'll start to see that shrink down as well. So we're more reactive to the newer world, which is fantastic.
Which is then leads to the data led, and then just means it's all just going along basically. Yeah, but if you look at it, you know, Singapore seems to have the best, you know, micro credential sort of lifelong learning system that isn't wrapped into apprenticeships, but it's that short duration. I've just been really lucky to be able to go and chat to the people that sort of create that. Do you know what I mean? And like it's globally renowned. So I think it's really smart as well to be data led, short duration. You know, add that into apprentice. It just makes sense really. But I think it's like you said, people getting their head around what that is, and it's new, and it's sort of having that sort of change management and an agilic mindset, isn't it? You know, how we're going to sort of do it really.
Well, in fact, as I mentioned before, you know, the AI boost thing that was announced last week, you know, what happened in that was we'd got, if you're talking about AI, I mean, the only people who have really got the dynamism to create AI upskilling mechanisms as quick as, you know, for the latest and greatest thing is really the industry itself. So what done is got the industry together, you know, so the Googles and Microsofts and everybody else who are in there, they're creating some of their capability, which they've already got, because they're teching their people about how to, you know, AI. And then we've used some mechanisms from Skills England to look at the behaviours and the structure and the you know, the shape of what it could look like. And we're allowing people to certify against that or to match against that. And then we're giving them a digital badge. Now, it's not perfect. It's not saying this is an apprenticeship or a degree we're given. It's just saying, here's a way of us starting to rally industry around some of this as well, so that you've got all that system we just talked about with apprenticeships and short courses and foundations and apprenticeship units and so on. But there is a bunch of other stuff out there, and how do we sort of pull that in so that people feel it's part of the same thing? And so people can do one of these digital credentials and go, you know what, I did that course. It fulfills these sets of behaviors and criteria and knowledge and skills. Isn't that a good thing? So,
100%.
It's easy to look at one or the other, but the fact is we need to evolve the system, and trying these sort of things is really important, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it'll probably be a chat for another day, but I think that is like personally the way to go, to be able to have that short duration work ready. It's that change of mindset again around this is about being work ready, relevant, and constantly be able to update, and be able to be reactive to the changes. We touched on it, and I think we've probably covered 90% of it, but I personally think the world of work is going to change massively in the next 5 to 7, definitely 10 years. If the brakes go on, it's 10 years. It's like that, it's happening type of thing. And I think artificial intelligence, generative AI is 3 years old, and it's like, everyone's probably used it already a couple of times today. If the audience are looking at this, so how do you sort of see the skills system, apprenticeships in particular, adapting to this change of work? I think we've touched on it, but it's like, how can we keep that pace? It's moving, it's going to move faster. How can we, keep that, get our foundations in place for that, getting ready for this change,
Yeah, so I think the one thing we need to think, Gavin, is everything's not a nail, right? So we've got a hammer. We can't fix every problem doing this. Part of this is about employers and others thinking about this. But, that's why I think things like, one of the words that I think, represents a lot of this is giving people confidence. And I think whether that's a young person feeling confident they've got the capability to go into here, or a worker going, you know what, I'm not scared of AI because I've done a very basic course, whether it be a foundation apprenticeship or a short course that comes through industry and is certified with a badge, or whether it's an apprenticeship or whatever. But I feel confident that I can start to do things because, you and I, maybe because we've got a bit more technical bias, you go and, you know what, I'll just stick a bunch of these documents here, ask it to give me a summary, then tell it to write me a plan and do that. Now, if you're a person working inside a company, you're like, I'm not sure I should do that. And, and maybe you shouldn't, actually. I'm not suggesting everybody just puts all the company's documents in there. But you need the confidence to do that. You need to know that, don't you? You need to, how do these systems work? How do they learn? What is it about? What is it good at? What is it not good at? So I think confidence is a really important word in here. And I think part of what we need to do in Skills England is give people confidence, all parts of their life and career, that there's something there to help them. We need to be, and I think, I said it in the task force and in my digital skills council, Skills England, we need to get the most digitally and AI confident, let alone skills confident nation in the world. We need to aspire to be, better than Singapore. Now, Singapore do things differently, but we need to show that we care about creating a nation that's got that sort of capability. And I think that's about giving people confidence to use the skills they've got. We know that when you see the apprentices, whether they be a plumber or a mechanic or whatever, when they've been to their apprenticeship and they've done it in the, in the lab or whatever they're in, they're much more confident going back to work and doing something like that. Whereas, and that's true of AI as well. We've got to make sure that people in their normal lives know what's good and bad about AI, what should and shouldn't they use it for. And then when they're in their work, they need to do that. And then there'll be obviously people who are at more advanced level who'll be writing language models and looking at, tokens and gradients and all the technical things that are within AI. But that's not for everybody. That's for different sets of people. So I think the world of work is going to change. It needs to change in a way that we've got that people feel in control of it and can adapt, because we say all these things, but you're going to have X numbers of jobs in your life and you're going to have to reskill yourself and so on. But frankly, if you just say that as a sort of scary statistic, all you're doing is scaring people more. You need to give them the confidence to go, yeah, okay, that's good, and I'm going to go and use this to help me. I'm not very confident in spelling and writing. So why don't I use that thing to just help draft things out, and then I'll read it through myself, and I'll be better as a result. I'm a coder, could I just get it to error check my code and do something? And, I'm not saying that's the solution to everything, but it's those kind of things, thinking, is that okay to do that? Or is it going to, am I going to get spammed forever? Or am I going to be sucked into a vortex or whatever? I mean, genuinely, people don't know. And so I think we have to give them that confidence that the world is changing, not just because of AI, because of all sorts of things, climate crisis, global order, etc. All is changing. So people need to feel confident. And I think that's the best thing we could offer the nation going forward.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's where the shorter duration is, obviously, but the heart of it is coming from the apprenticeship units and stuff like, because there's been so many studies around the digital divide before you even get to like sort of advanced level generative AI or agentic AI or whatever. And, but the things are still sort of adapting. It's that AI literacy, it's that critical thinking, it's the whole safeguarding issue as well. We've got whole things with certain AI models on certain media platforms. Probably shouldn't mention it because who knows? I don't want to get like us sued for billions of pounds or something. But like it's that whole thing of how do we navigate this and how do we equip people?
Make people feel comfortable that they can work with it. Because if you can't work with it, it's a bit like saying, we're not going to give people to be able to use machinery or whatever because it's all a bit too scary. And unless you're the world expert on it, you can't use it. Well, that's not helpful, is it? You want people to be able to use it. To be able to drive their car, to ride their bike, to use a machine at work, to use the fax machine in the old days and whatever now, it might be. It's the equivalent. That makes people more productive. My God, you wouldn't not want them to be able to use a spreadsheet if you're an accountant, because it's a bit scary. It's like you want to add it all up yourself, do you? That's going to be hard.
Let's just have a really big calculator and a bit. But this then links as to why Skills England, the move with DWP were ready, and that change of sort of heart and focus on it, really, isn't it? Right? How can we raise productivity? How can we get there for people? Really, it's this, and then help people along the way. It's just, and that's the whole essence of apprenticeship. And the National Apprenticeship Week is that social mobility, isn't it? The changing of life for people, for employers as well, SMEs and large. Oh, hang on, we had this apprentice come in and they transformed our team, like you said. It's
no, it definitely changes things, and I know that in lots of examples when I put apprenticeships into teams, people would come back afterwards. Oh, this is incredible, and then we found that they were not only our most loyal people in many cases, much more loyal than other entry points into the company. Sometimes our top performers, these are the people who were going to the celebration clubs and so on because they were the best that we had. And also they were just bringing a new, young, energetic perspective, which is brilliant. All companies need that. Everybody needs that.
Yeah, no, definitely. We're nearly out of time, but Phil, if you want to say one thing to senior leadership in colleges, training providers, awarding organisations for this 19th National Apprenticeship Week, what would you want to say is for the start of this week?
Well, the colleges, training providers, and the kind of this infrastructure that delivers apprenticeship is vital. I mean, it is a vital part of the infrastructure. We can't do it. So what we need to do is to say, let's celebrate where we've come from. I totally get that there are challenges and problems and things that one has to deal with on a day-to-day. But, when you look at these, we went up to Middlesbrough College for our last board meeting. It was brilliant. I mean, we got a meal with it. We got our lunch made, our dinner made by a young load of apprentices who were, doing not only the sort of catering part of it, but the service part. They were coming up and telling us what the wines were. Not. It was brilliant. And I think we have to recognise that, all parts of infrastructure evolve. If you've driven down the roads recently, you'll know that they need a bit of evolution of the road system. As a cyclist, there's a lot of potholes around, believe me. But it evolves, roads get better. When I was young, I remember my dad drove us from Scotland all the way to Cornwall before there was any motorways. We just slept all night. Now that's a totally different journey. And I think we need to think about that, is that the infrastructure will continue to evolve. we need to work with you on that. We need to make sure we're sensitive. I know we need to communicate better, we need to engage better, but that's really the journey we're on, and I'm really passionate that we do more of that, and that's what I think the team really want to do. So, and I think National Apprenticeship Week is just, you know, kind of, we all get all that, but let's just celebrate the amazing stuff that all you guys are doing and producing these amazing young people and what they're able to do. So great.
Yeah, and that's brilliant. Thank you, Phil, and happy National Apprenticeship Week, everyone. I hope you have it's going to be a busy week, but I hope you have a great week. And we know there's going to be a lot of news announcements coming out from across everyone, like from this is my learner, this is an employer doing this is what we've seen in social mobility with X joining us. And let's just celebrate that. You know, it's this isn't just happening in a week. This is every day. This is everyday stuff in the sector happens, and this is our chance to like wave a flag and celebrate it in this week, isn't it? Really. So, you know, thank you everyone, and Phil, thank you for staying. I know it's been a really, really busy week. So
no, it's been great. It's been great, Gavin. I really appreciate it. It's great to talk to you as usual, and hopefully we can do some more of this going forward. I think this form of, you know, being able to have a reasonable chat about things in a balanced way. You know, it's kind of the opposite of, you've got a press release on one end and you've got a TV program on the other, which is all, this is a nice format for just being able to talk about what we really need to talk about. And I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, no, because I know the audience appreciates this better here. Well, why are we going through this? What's this mean? And like, yeah, and thank you for that, you know, and just better like just explain the heart of it, you know, and also on the journey. We haven't got this crack, that agile mindset, the change management of helping everyone go through it. So, you know, thank you. But thanks everyone. Happy National Apprenticeship Week, and we'll see you really soon.
Cheers.